Hey guys, so I'm here today with a different kind of a video. I feel like it's been a minute since I have been able to make a video. I have been sick for the past couple of weeks. This is the first week that I actually feel back to normal, thankfully. So I wasn't able to make a video make this video even though I've been wanting to make it for a while now. But I mentioned in a previous video that I would want to share with you some of the different resources that I have been using over the past few months, I would say, for learning more about not just Buddhism, but helping me with learning more about mindfulness and meditation as well. I'm not going to go into too much depth about each of the books that I'm going to be talking about. If you would like me to get into more detail about any of the resources that I will be talking about in this video, then feel free to comment and let me know. But I basically just want to show you guys and talk about some of the books and some of the podcasts as well that I have been listening to that has helped me so far along this part of my journey. So first I will start with the Buddhism for Dummies. I am a huge fan of the Dummies books. I have a few of them for different topics, and I think that they are just wonderful tools when it comes to learning about basically everything. Like anything that you could want to learn about, there's a pretty good chance that there is a Dummies book for it. So this book has been my go-to for learning Buddhism. I feel like it has all of the information that I personally was seeking when I started learning about Buddhism. I'm still learning, obviously, but this was a book that I had a hard time putting down. And what I love about these books is you don't have to read them from like the beginning to end. Like you can start anywhere. So I would sit down with the book and look at the different chapters and the different parts and kind of decide in that moment which one I was sort of feeling for, or which one that I was the most interested in reading up on in that moment. And I've pretty much read the entire book so far. There are a few chapters that I haven't hit quite yet, but for the most part I have read through, pretty much most of this book. I think it is a wonderful tool for learning Buddhism, at least it was for me. Like I said, it's just full of information. It has a lot of information on more of like the traditional way of Buddhism as well, and kind of like from a religious standpoint, which was also interesting to know about. I tend to look at it more as a philosophy rather than a religion, but it was still really nice to be able to get more of that, that background and that history as to where it all began. I feel like even if you're not looking at Buddhism as your religion, I still feel like it's good to know where it came from. It's good to know where it originated from, and also just the different ways that people can view it and use it within their everyday lives. So I highly recommend the Dummies books, not just for Buddhism, but really for anything that you're interested in learning about. I think they're great. And the next book I want to talk about is Secular Buddhism by Noah Rasheta. So this book is great if you are like me, who views Buddhism from more of a secular standpoint. It's a very easy book to follow along with as well, and like I've mentioned before, I am always a fan of books that I can just really relate with, even just the writing style as well. I'm not a fan of books that are very like complex and use words that I have to look up on Google, like I want to be able to read something and just, keep up with it and know what it's talking about. And I feel like this book is written in that sort of way. So he talks about just ways that you can use Buddhism in your everyday life while still talking about the more traditional ways of Buddhism as well. He gives really great examples that are relatable, ways that you can, catch yourself in certain situations and say to yourself that this would actually be a good learning point. You're going through some sort of a situation, and now would be a good time to try and apply, what you've been learning. So I really appreciate that factor as well, the fact that it is very relatable. And then we have the very compact How to Fight by Thich Nhat Hanh. And this book is not only adorable, but it offers some really great insight as well. When I first started reading it, I started reading it from the beginning and working my way through, but I felt like I wasn't really connecting a whole lot with what I was reading, so I put it away for a little while, and then I found myself, when I was going through certain situations or having a bit of a difficult time, picking the book back up and kind of just, flipping through and finding a heading that matched whatever it was that I felt like I was going through at that time. And then when I read through it, I found that I was really taking it in a lot more and relating to the words this time that I was actually reading. So they're roughly a paragraph or two in length, and some of them have little illustrations with them, which I think is super cute. And yeah, again, they're just really relatable. They really help you to, open up your mind to things and see things in a different light, how to be more mindful in certain situations, especially situations that are tough, maybe on days that just aren't going the way that you hoped that it would. And the fact that this book is quite small, like compared to the other books, it makes it great also if you were to carry it around with you. And the last book that I'm going to talk about is Why Buddhism is True by Robert Wright. So out of all of the books that I've talked about so far, this is the one that I am the least familiar with. I started reading this one, and then I ended up buying Secular Buddhism, and I stopped reading this one to read this one. But now that I am done with this one, I can get back to reading this one. What caught my eye about this book was how it explains on the cover here the science and philosophy behind Buddhism. I feel like within the other books that I have talked about already, none of them have really approached the topic from a scientific standpoint. So that's what kind of intrigued me and made me want to purchase this book, to kind of see it from that point of view. So yeah, I'm interested in continuing on with this one and seeing, hopefully from more of a scientific standpoint and outlook on Buddhism, what the author has to offer from that sort of, side of it. So yeah, those are the books that I have been reading or have read over the past couple of months. I feel like they have given me some really great insight on, like I said, not just Buddhism, but mindfulness and meditation as well, and has really helped me to change how I approach certain situations, especially situations where I might feel angry or, just upset, more of those difficult kind of situations where it's hard to stop in those moments and be mindful of what you're feeling rather than just jumping straight into those emotions and reacting. So they've definitely helped me with learning how to feel more, and be in the moment more. So another thing that I wanted to talk about was the podcasts that I have been listening to as well that have given me the same sort of insights and has helped me learn along my journey as well. So the first podcast that I started listening to was actually Secular Buddhism by Noah Rasheta. So it is the author of this book. He is the host of the podcast Secular Buddhism as well. So I was actually introduced to the podcast first, and through the podcast is where I discovered that he wrote a book, and he actually has a few books that he has published since doing the podcast, but because I loved the podcast so much and I love reading, I figured that I should probably get his book. So what he talks about in the book is very similar to the podcast, and some of it even seems like it's word for word. Like, I remember reading certain parts and remembering that he said those exact words in the podcast. So that was kind of nice because it really helps me to take in the information even more, hearing it through the podcast and then also reading it in the book as well. The second podcast that I enjoy listening to is Everyday Buddhism by Wendy Hallett. So again, this is another great podcast that talks about ways that you can incorporate Buddhism into your everyday life, hence the title of the podcast. And then the third podcast is A Skeptic's Path to Enlightenment by Scott Snibbe. So it's funny because I discovered the Everyday Buddhism podcast through the Secular Buddhism podcast, and then I discovered the Skeptic's Path to Enlightenment podcast through Wendy's Everyday Buddhism podcast. So everyone, they were all interviewing each other, and then that's how I discovered everybody's podcasts. I feel like all three of them do a good job with sort of balancing between talking about more of the traditional side of Buddhism and then also talking about just the simple things that you can do in your everyday life to incorporate Buddhism into your way of living and bettering your life. And maybe podcasts aren't your thing, but for me, I find them great for when I'm at work and I'm tired of listening to music. Maybe I've just listened to everything I feel like I could have listened to that day and I need something different. I will pull up one of the podcasts and I can listen to it for hours. So yeah, if you are a podcast listener and you're interested in these kinds of topics, then I highly recommend the three that I have just listed for you. So yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to share with you guys today. I wanted to talk a little bit about all of the different resources that I have been using over the past couple of months to help me better understand Buddhism, mindfulness, and meditation. And yeah, for me personally, I have found all of these resources to be helpful, sometimes in the same way and sometimes in completely different ways. But what works for me may not work for you. Everybody's different. Everybody learns in different ways, so that's something to always keep in mind as well. So there you have it. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I shall see you in the next one.